Today we're talking about Ganesha, the newest god release in SMITE, a new guardian. We will talk about both the abilities as well as item builds and playstyle, and some other tips and tricks that you may want to keep in mind. Let's first talk about the abilities. His one is a Turn of Fate. Now, Turn of Fate is a line clear ability, so it's primarily used for lane clear, and as such should be maximized first in most situations. It should also be your first point on level 1. This ability only increases the damage when being leveled up, but the damage is huge, and while I expect a nerf for it in the near future, until that happens, it's just too much of a tool for pressure to pass up on it. The important part here that's worth keeping in mind is that it amplifies your allies' damage. Therefore, if you have any allies and they have clearing abilities, they should wait for you to use your one before they use their clearing ability, as their ability will deal more damage afterwards. If your allies are not doing that, then try to tell them early in the game, because it can really make a difference if every single clearing ability deals more damage. In this combination with this ability plus the extra damage for your allies' clearing ability and attacks, you will be able to clear waves very early into the game very quickly. As a matter of fact, the moment it's so strong that you can even play him in other lanes because of this strong clear. This extra damage also should not be underestimated when it comes to extra damage in a team fight. You want to hit as many enemies as possible, as early as possible in the fight with this in order to get your allies the buff for 3 seconds, and that really helps them to engage. The moment they get this buff, they should use all their abilities in order to get the maximized damage on the enemy. And this is not as hard to do as it may sound, simply because of the fact that as a tank you're going to be frontlining anyways, and you'll be able to hit at least 2 to 3 enemies most of the time. And if you do, that's already a 4 to 6% damage increase for every ability of allies nearby. Ganesha 2 is a little different. It is more of a team protection utility tool that is also a pretty strong CC. It lasts for 1.8 seconds, it's a cone ability, and in this front cone, enemies will be silenced. The silence lasts as long as they're directly affected by that cone, so this has to be channeled onto them. And everyone around you in a small radius of 35 units gets up to 60 extra protections. Because of the protection scaling up with each rank of the ability, it makes sense to put some points into this when you can and earlier in the game, because it will give your team more protections. And it will also lower the cooldown of the ability down to 10 seconds before CDR, so quite frequently usable compared to other abilities. How exactly you want to use this in a team fight is up to you and depends on the situation. In many scenarios, it will be good to block off somebody's escape or engage tools, or even catching them out of dashes if you're fast enough, because the windup of this ability is relatively short. Other than that, it can just prevent strong ultimates from coming out if you're able to get close enough to an enemy that would be a contender for that. If you, for example, manage to get this on a Poseidon that doesn't use his ult beforehand, then you will have a lot of the enemy damage prevented if he can get shut down quickly enough. You can combo this with his 3, or you can use it without it. It really depends on what's happening. Sometimes it can be worth just using the 2 for the extra protections on an ally if there's a physical ability or a physical attacker on them, so that damage gets prevented, though most of the time the silence is probably what you're going to be looking for more. His third ability is Remove Obstacles. Well, this is pretty straightforward. It is a dash that can go through player-made obstacles, player-made walls, and what it will do is it will deal damage to anyone that it connects with and will hold enemy guards in place, stunning them for a brief moment and then knocking them up. The interesting interaction is that even if some of your allies push them out of the initial stun, the knockup still seems to apply. This may be glitched for now, or it may be intended, but for example, if a Hercules pushes him out of the ability while it's not completely finished, the knockup will still happen afterwards with you not being close to that enemy. As such, this is a good escape tool and a strong single target CC, though it's worth keeping in mind that it kinda CCs you at the same time because you can't move either. His ultimate is Damic Pillars, I still don't know how to pronounce that, and that one is a very impactful teamfight ultimate especially. You summon 4 pillars on the ground with lines between them that connect them, and these connecting lines deal damage to anyone who tries to pass through. They will also slow that enemy, and they will reduce that enemy's protections. Standing on those lines will mean that you take the whole damage continuously. If you manage to stand in the middle of that area and not go into the sides where the pillars are, you will not take any damage or be slowed as an enemy. So it is worth trying to get an enemy right on the edge right away, or get them in a position where they are locked down in the center and you can burst them from there. Leaping guards have a decent way of getting out of this, but that's pretty much about it. Otherwise, they will have to pass through these walls. Putting additional points into this ability has multiple benefits. A, the damage gets increased by 40 per rank per tick. B, the slow gets increased by 5% per rank. And C, the protection reduction gets increased by 10 per rank. The only downside is the rising mana cost, but that's pretty much standard. Another advice that I would give about this ability in particular is that I would highly recommend putting this either on normal cast or quick cast. The reason behind that is, while you usually are able to tell the radius of the ability because it's usually a circle or line, the square is very different from those shapes and makes it very hard to tell where exactly the ability will land if you don't have any sort of indication for it. Especially if you want to catch an enemy on the edge right away, it becomes a lot easier if you have a line that shows you where the ability lands, so I would usually even prefer normal cast for this. Obviously, Ganesh's passive is worth mentioning as well. Every time you kill something on the map, an ally that is nearby will get the assist if they're close enough. And you have an increased assist range on top of that. So, while with other Guardians you have to be pretty careful not to take too many kills from your team, you have no worries about that as Ganesh. If you see somebody on low health and you think you can secure the kill with any of your abilities, just go for it. It will go to one of your teammates if they're nearby, and if not, you get a kill for yourself, but in either way, it's not going to be any harm for any of your teammates because you took a kill, because any benefit they would otherwise get, they will still get. And that brings us to the ability leveling order. In regards to skill leveling priority, I would put the ultimate first, then the 1, then the 2, and then the 3. The ultimate does have a lot of additional benefits by leveling it up, so I would usually not recommend skipping it, though leveling the 1 and 2 can have very high benefits as well, and in certain scenarios you may not need the extra protection reduction or something, and you may want to opt for those first for that 1 extra level, but generally speaking you want to put points into that ultimate because it has a huge impact. Once again, Turn of Fate is also very strong because it's such a strong clearing tool, so it should be maximized whenever possible and when you don't have to put points into the ultimate. And is also very good to be leveled up because it gives you all those extra protections and it gives you that CDR on the ability. So overall, it's a very beneficial ability to level up, and it would be worth leveling over the 1 at certain points if the 1 wasn't that strong. You can consider skipping some points on the 1 if you feel like you have enough clear already, or you don't need more clear for your allies at a certain point, and just prioritize the 2 instead. That's absolutely an option if you want to go for it. But in the current meta, the strong clear will definitely help, and most of his abilities are already strong at 1 point. The only ability that doesn't really benefit much from maxing is the 3, because all you really get is extra mana cost and some extra damage, and, well, after all, he's not necessarily a damage dealer. When it comes to his item build, I will first say I would like to direct you straight over to my Guardian support build guide, because pretty much all that is said in there applies here as well. It's simply the same stuff. You want to have your watch as gift in the beginning. You probably want to start with boots, or maybe with a chalice if that's your thing. Then you want to finish up those boots, and maybe if Lono's Mask at some point makes it into the game, you want to consider building that. Otherwise, you probably want Mark of the Vanguard, then God of Thieves, Sovereignty, Hardwood Amulet, and situational defensive or team-oriented items like Shogun's Kusari. Obviously, counters like Pestilence and so on are always great as well. Generally speaking, any aura that helps other supports helping their team isn't wrong for Ganesh either, especially considering that he has the additional protections in his 2 that really help you out. He also has some tools to amplify his allies' damage already with his 1 and his ultimate, so building up on that is never a bad idea. You can obviously go for some more cooldown reduction on him as well, though I would generally say that is not the most beneficial way to play him. Ganesh's problem is mostly that he doesn't have the same teamfight CC big ultimate that many others have, because due to the fact that leap's easily avoided, many characters can just get out of his. In that regard, it is helpful for him to have other tools that help the team in different ways, instead of having that big lockdown, and for that our items are just great. Other items that I would like to point out in this particular scenario or in this particular condition is Spectral Armor on one hand, which allows you to CC enemies without having to use a CC, and Mantle of Discord, which basically does the same thing. Both of these have their own built-in CC that will further his CC and really keep the enemies from focusing you down as well, which obviously helps in getting your kid off. That said, at the moment Ganesh is very strong when it comes to his values overall as well, so you could literally go for a power/pen build and that would still make him have a big impact in the game. But that's not what we're talking about here, we're talking about how to play him in support. And also I do expect all those numbers to be nerfed to the extent that Power Ganesh will probably be a thing of the past soon enough. Last but not least, in regards to playstyle, it's important to note that you want to be as close to your allies as possible at all times. You want to give them that assist bonus, you want to give them the benefits from your 1 and your 2, and with your limited CC, you're really depending on being where you have to be in the right moment in order to make most use of your CC, and being where you have to be for support is usually close to your allies in order to help them. You cannot frontline as much as other supports can in that sense, because they can go a little further from the allies as well and still reach the same level of effectiveness, but that is okay, you can kind of make up for it with the ultimate, which has a pretty long range and can do a lot in a fight even from a distance. But you would generally want to have some other sort of either tanky or CC heavy player on your team in order to compensate for the fact that you lack that a little bit. For example, some gods that would be a nice combination would be something like Thor, like Amaterasu, any of those gods that have their own ways of frontlining a little bit, and also high CC. Or more specifically, high CC AoE teamfight ultimates. Ganesh can be played pretty aggressive in lane due to the fact that he has very strong clear, strong bully potential through that, and the extra damage for your allies, as well as good ways of interrupting them and giving more protections to your teammates, meaning they can fight into enemies more even when minions are still up due to the fact that they will be protected from them. Due to the way his kit works and his abilities kinda scale up pretty well with higher levels, he doesn't fall off too much though. He keeps this momentum that he starts in the early game in regards to his power curve and just stays kinda up there. The only thing that he really lacks is a bit of harder teamfight CC that no one can avoid. With that, thank you guys for watching, I hope this was insightful and informative. If you enjoyed this, feel free to click that sub button and maybe the bell next to it if you haven't yet. It really helps me out. See you for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.